Hey everyone, my name is Jackson Nordbeck, and over the past semester, I have been researching the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on Christian worship services. I was interested in this topic as I have volunteered with worship and technology in multiple different churches, as well as on campus in the Alma College Chapel. With the quick onset of restrictions due to an increase in COVID-19 cases, the medium that worship was held quickly changed and adapted throughout the past year. Here's a short video showing the different mediums and styles that worship took over the past year.
I would search and stop at nothing.
And sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough to light a your grace that washes over me. Let faith arise.
Let faith arise.
Let faith arise.
Let faith arise.
So first about me. I am a junior integrative and physiology and health science major, and am minoring in music and religious studies. I am the technology and facilities coordinator for the Alma College Chapel, and this summer I worked as a technology intern at Trinity Evangelical Presbyterian Church in Plymouth, Michigan. And over the last 4 semesters, I have volunteered at Alma Church of God as a technology volunteer. While worshiping this, I decided to look strictly at worship and how Sunday Christian worship services were affected and changed throughout the pandemic. This quote from 2 Chronicles in the Bible gives a good overview of what worship is. Worship should be an opportunity to show praise and faith in God, and it can be done in response to music or in prayer. Although worship is mostly the same in differing denominations, each denomination has a slightly different interpretation of worship, as the 2 mission statements from Church of God and the Evangelical Presbyterian Church show here on this slide. So what is a church? Although church is often used to describe the building where the church community gathers, churches are really a community of believers and a community in which the worship is practiced. This can be through small groups, Bible studies, music, and prayers. Although it's not always necessarily the physical building, it sometimes can be referred to as that as well. So now to my research methods. 4 different positions were chosen to compare between Alma Church of God and Trinity Evangelical Presbyterian Church. Clergy, worship leaders, technical directors, and communications and connections directors were all interviewed from both churches. All of the participants were contacted over email and scheduled a 30-minute time slot for their interview. All interviewees were sent a link for a virtual meeting and their interview questions prior to the meeting time. All interviews were done over virtual meeting software Microsoft Teams and were recorded and transcribed after the interview. Interviews started with 7 general questions regarding the participants' education, changes due to COVID-19, satisfaction within the congregation regarding COVID-19 restrictions and changes in meaning or intimacy of the services. After responding to the general questions, each participant was asked one follow-up question that pertained to their specific role or position in the church. All interviews that were recorded were then transcribed using Sonic's transcribing software, and transcripts were coded and results were analyzed. First, I interviewed the pastor and clergy of both churches. In most instances, the pastor's role in a Christian house of worship is to choose an applicable message and use that to connect with the congregation and share a message they think will be most important to the community. Clergy are often the face of the church and are who the community hears and responds to with questions and concerns. Pastors are responsible for selecting the passages and creating a sermon that will lead the congregation down God's path while also helping the community through hardships they might be headed through together. Reverend Erin Taylor is a senior pastor at Alma Church of God and has been working there since 2018. She attended Anderson University where she obtained a master's degree in theology. Reverend Mark Fuller is a senior pastor at Trinity EPC and has a Master's of Divinity from Denver Seminary. He also has a Master's in Engineering from the University of Michigan and Rensselaer Polytechnic University. He has worked at Trinity for more than 15 years as a pastor and 10 and a half years as senior pastor. Next, I looked at the worship directors from both Trinity EPC and Alma Church of God. Worship and music within a service are used to reiterate and reinforce the message and/or create a time for reflection. The worship leader and director in the church is often the face and name of the worship band, instrumentalist, or choir in the congregation. The worship leader may be in charge of leading worship on Sunday evenings or sometimes during the weeks on Wednesdays. Worship leaders also lead the choir in rehearsals and in worship services. Worship leaders pick relevant music that fits the message and the theme of the service. Angie Armstrong is the Worship Arts Director at Alma Church of God. She attended Central Michigan University and earned her bachelor's in science. She has been the volunteer worship director at Alma Church of God for many years and was hired onto staff as a worship arts director when the pandemic hit in mid-March 2020. Scotty Gullidge has his master's degree in Christian ministry and music and has worked at Trinity as a worship leader since 2004 and as a worship leader for 34 years. Now to technology. I interviewed the technology directors for both Alma Church of God and Trinity next. Technical directors and technology volunteers attend rehearsals and services, setting sound levels on house and live stream sound boards, running pan-tilt zoom cameras, and video switchers, allowing the online congregants to see the service and read the slides or lyrics. They also run lyrics for the projectors and televisions up front to make sure that the lyrics are in the order for the band that week. Leighton Collingwood is a technical director at Alma Church of God and was hired in early 2020. He graduated in spring 2020 from Alma College, where he earned his Bachelor's of Science, majoring in computer science. In addition, he has many years of experience in directing tech for theaters. Jason Bodwin is a volunteer technical director at Trinity EPC and has volunteered for many years. He has his Master's of Science from Oakland University. Communication and connections directors have their role of using social media, apps, and written communication to connect the church community together. The communications director's role is managing small groups and the engagement of members within the church community. Emily Shaw is the communications director of Alma Church of God. She has a high school education with office administration training. She has held this position of communications director since early 2020. Dana Watson is the connections director at Trinity EPC, and she has a bachelor's degree in nursing and previously practiced as a registered nurse. Dana started at Trinity in August 2020 and has worshiped there since 2010. Communications and connections directors have to communicate changes and work to connect the community through worship on Sundays and through events throughout the week. First, and the most common result that was brought up in interviews was the fact that shorter services were needed due to the worship moving online. Reverend Fuller said it was hard to set aside over an hour and a half in the house, and shortening services helped to keep the attention of the congregants at home. As services were all online, they tended to fall around an hour, 45 minutes, and lengthened 45 minutes to an hour. And they lengthened a little bit once returning to in-person. Shorter services were achieved by shortening the message from the pastor and cutting a song or maybe two. While pre-recording services, the editor was also able to insert bumper videos and cut recordings to minimize the amount of time between components of a normal service, reducing distractions as well as shortening the service. Just like taking online classes or being in a staff meeting from the kitchen table, there are many more distractions in the home than in a normal worship space. A major change when worship went online was the addition of distractions. Having the ability to sit on the couch while watching church is cool, but it also means the kids, pets, and other technology in the house is present and can cause these distractions. When going to church on a normal Sunday, phones and other tech is left in the car and or silenced, and children are dropped to either Sunday school or youth group. From personal experience, having the whole family in the living room for worship is great, but it also means many more distractions, from cats meowing to other family members playing on their phones, or even laundry getting done. It just isn't the same environment. Surprisingly enough, even though many distractions are present, many congregants mentioned that services felt more intimate and that the messages were able to be understood much better on the screen. Although it might have been more difficult to write and record a sermon, as Reverend Taylor stated in her interview, with the ability to choose sermon location that was more relevant to the topic or use unique visual aids, it helped to give the online congregation a better connection to the pastor, and it allowed the congregants to see the pastor on a large screen, better than they could ever see from the back pew of the church. This made it feel like the pastor was in your room preaching right to you. Now, the last result that I found. When asked if they saw the lockdowns coming, almost everyone interviewed said they stated that they saw the pandemic lasting a month or maybe two, and then being resolved by the end of the summer at the latest. This caused staff at both churches to make short-term plans that later got changed when they realized the pandemic was going to last much longer than 2 months. As Reverend Taylor stated, I think for me, my expectations have continued to change throughout this experience, almost like someone turned off the lights and my eyes are adjusting. I think this is a very good metaphor, and she summed up the ever-changing rules, regulations, and cases present in the surrounding area. Throughout the research I have found 4 main points that help maintain the intimacy and style of worship service from pre-COVID. First, shortening services to 45 minutes to an hour when online helps keep the congregation engaged, while still giving enough time to get the message across and engage in worshipful music. 2. Choosing songs for online worship that are reflective and well known is important to keep the congregation engaged in their living rooms, as they don't have a live band to worship with and get energy from. Choosing songs that might have a worshipful feeling or are more reflective to help keep the congregation engaged or have a more reflective moment in prayer are also important. Third, minimizing distractions during online worship is very important when pre-recording. Worship bumper videos and editing can help get rid of these quiet gaps between songs, sermons, and prayers. Minimizing distractions is more important than ever online, as it is very easy to get distracted on your phone when service is on a television or on a computer. And fourth and finally, I found that proactive planning for what is to come can help to create intimate services, and reactive planning can cause worship to lose intimacy due to technical difficulties or miscommunication. Planning was difficult towards the beginning of the pandemic when no one knew what was going to come, but as the spread of COVID-19 slowed and more information found planning can now be proactive and can help increase the intimacy of services. Here's the references of all the sources I used. Any questions? And thank you for coming.